The tide left the riverbank bright and raw, a slick ribbon of silt shining like a new scar. I was walking where the driftwood gathered, between the last stubborn reeds and the low stone wall. My grandmother swore could hold back anything, when glass winked at me from the weeds. A bottle? Green, the heavy kind that used to hold soda at the diner, before they changed to plastic and a different song on the jukebox. Inside it, a letter. I told myself it was nothing. A tourist joke, a lover's dare. A girlhood fantasy I should have outgrown, along with writing on my sneakers and believing the river knew my name. But when I cracked the brittle cork and slit the paper free, the envelope said Mara in a hand I didn't recognize. The R curled like a fishhook. The A was open at the top, as if the writer had forgotten to finish the loop. My name. Not to whoever finds this, not dear stranger me. I looked up, instinctively searching the water for a face I couldn't possibly see. The current moved as if it had somewhere else to be. A gull perched on a rotting post watched me with the bored entitlement of all gulls. The town on the opposite bank was the same as yesterday's, crusted, stubborn, a handful of roofs shrugged against the Atlantic wind. I turned the envelope over. No stamp. The flap wasn't sealed. The river had done that for it, pressing the paper flat and slick. When I opened it, the first line made my throat catch, not because of what it said, but how the handwriting leaned toward me as if the writer had been in a hurry to reach my eyes. If you're reading this, the river kept its promise. I read it again. The words felt like pebbles in my mouth, smooth, impossible to keep. A promise. Footsteps shifted behind me on the stones. I slid the paper half back into the envelope before I turned. It was only Mr. Delaney with his dog Scout, who refused to heel for anyone except his wife, and she'd been gone 6 winters. He lifted a mittened hand. "Morning, Mara, morning. Water's high," he said, as if the water ever stopped narrating itself. "You back for long?" "I don't know," I lied. I didn't know the length of my staying yet. I had come because the small house by the river still had my grandmother's quilts, and because my mother's last postcard had said, "You don't have to forgive me to come home." I had come because running finally got me nowhere. I slipped the letter into my coat pocket. Scout sniffed at the bottle, then decided it didn't concern him, and dragged Mr. Delaney toward the path. When they were gone, I read the rest. "You will find me where the river hides the stars." The letter ended there. No date. No return address, unless E counted as a place. I folded the paper along someone else's crease and felt a softness where water had thinned it. The bottle, the envelope, the absence of explanation, all of it could be a prank. But the way my name sat on the page, the way the M opened its arms, it was as if it had been waiting for me without knowing what I would be when I arrived. Grandmother used to say the river was two-faced, one face for those who looked at it from the shore, another for those who let it carry them. I'd been both, once. Before the night the sirens and the rain braided themselves into a single sound, and the grown-ups spoke in the kitchen with the door closed, and we moved inland with boxers labeled Winter and Keep and Don't Ask. I tucked the bottle under my arm and carried it back to the house. The door stuck twice before it opened, swollen from the season. The place smelled like cedar and dust. In the sink, 2 bowls leaned into each other like they had been gossiping since August. My grandmother's radio, the square one with the cracked dial, sat on top of the bread box. When I turned it, it found a station full of static, and then a voice that sounded too smooth for this town. I set the bottle on the table, laid the letter beside it, and stood there longer than made sense, as if the act of leaving them together might coax the rest of the message to reveal itself. "You will find me where the river hides the stars." I mouthed the words until they lost their shape, until they were only breath. I took out my phone, typed "River hides the stars" into a search bar, then deleted it. It felt wrong to let an algorithm be the first to answer. Outside, somebody hammered in a patient rhythm. 1, 2, 3, rest, the sound of a boat being mended. I stepped onto the porch. Across the road, the old boat shed's big door was rolled up. A man on a ladder worked along a keel rib with a chisel. Careful, absorbed. He wore a navy watch cap and a sweater the color of slate. Even from here, his attention made a circle around him like heat. He looked up as if I'd said his name. "Mara," he called. uncertainty tilting the word. I knew that voice. It had the same note it used to have when we were kids skipping stones. The last syllable asking if I'd count that as 5 skips, or if we'd start over. Eli, I said, and my breath came out in a cloud that made him blur for a second. He climbed down, wiped his hands on a rag, and crossed the road with the careful gait of someone who doesn't rush unless there's a tide to catch. The years had put stubble on his jaw and steadiness in his eyes. He stopped at the porch steps like a boundary he wasn't sure he could cross. You're back, he said. For now? The answer felt like a coat I wasn't sure fit. He nodded at the bottle through the window. Find a treasure. Depends on how you define treasure. I thought of the signature. The single letter that could be anyone and one person at once. What does the river hide when it hides the stars? Something changed in his expression, too quick for me to read. You've been away a while. You didn't answer my question. It depends on the night, he said. On the tide. On the company. I asked, trying for lightness and missing. He smiled, small and familiar. Maybe on that too. We stood in the cool day, and let the silence handle what we couldn't. The river made its own conversation, slapping the pilings and backing off like a child testing a boundary. Far out beyond the bend, a bell buoy spoke to itself. I should get back, he said, jerking his chin toward the boat shed. There's rot in the stern, I don't want to leave. Always the rot, I said, and we both heard the other meanings. He touched the brim of his cap and went. The house felt different when I went back in, as if someone had rearranged the light. I pulled down the attic cord to fetch a box of my grandmother's things I'd been avoiding. The ladder groaned. Dust unfurled in the beam like a private weather. The first box I opened held quilts, each square neat as a breath held and released. The second box held letters wrapped in kitchen twine. My hands knew the ritual. Unfold, search the date. Inventory the edges for what time had taken. None were addressed to me. Not at first. They were to my mother from her sister in Portland, from a friend in a different kind of trouble. From past winters that wrote about snow like it was a person you could get into an argument with and still love. At the bottom, there was an envelope without a stamp, the flap unsealed. My name on it, again, in the same unfamiliar hand. The R with its fishhook curve, Mara. My heart tripped. The attic air thinned. I sat cross-legged on the floor like a girl in the school library and opened it. You will want to turn back. Don't. At the bend, the river will look like it ends. It doesn't. Eat. Hands shaking, I spread both letters side by side on the quilt. Same paper, same tilt, same insistence. The attic smelled like cedar and something else like rain on hot dirt. First the riverbank. Now my grandmother's attic. 2 messages, no dates, both written like the writer believed I would come back and knew I'd need directions to the same place. I went to the window and pushed it open. From here, the river ran like a thought I could nearly hold. There was a place where it curved out of sight, a shoulder of land that the kids called Star's Elbow, because on clear nights the sky caught there like a net. I hadn't been that far in years. Below, in the boat shed, Eli's hammer kept the old rhythm 1, 2, 3, rest. I folded the letters and slipped them into my jacket, already imagining the path under the pines. The boards of the footbridge breathing under my weight. The taste of salt at the bend. I told myself I was following a joke to its punchline. But the truth was, the river had said my name again, and I couldn't bear not to answer. I locked the house behind me and started toward the path. When I was little, the river was a boundary line drawn in silver. My mother used to say, don't chase the reflection. The water only tells half the truth. I never understood what she meant until the morning after the letter. The house had a sound to it again, the kettle clicking, the wind pawing at the shutters, like an animal that wanted in. I made coffee the way my grandmother did, too strong, too honest. Steam curled against the window and left fingerprints of warmth on the cold glass. The bottle stood where I'd left it, catching the weak sunlight, a ghost pretending to be useful. The 2 letters, one from the river, one from the attic, lay side by side like evidence of a secret too polite to speak out loud. I told myself I wouldn't think about them today. Instead, I walked into town. The path followed the river for most of the way, close enough to hear its private gossip. The tide was moving out, dragging the scent of seaweed and metal. A gull's cry echoed off the bridge arches thin, tired, but still certain it owned the morning. Main Street was almost empty. Mr. Delaney's hardware shop was open, its bell coughing when I stepped in. He looked up from a stack of nails. Back for good? He asked again, as if time could be convinced by repetition. Still deciding, I said. He nodded, that small town way of saying we'll see what the river decides for you. I bought new light bulbs, 2 candles, and a pack of envelopes. The irony didn't hit me until I was halfway home. Halfway, that's when I saw the footbridge. It looked smaller than it used to. The paint had peeled into curling flakes, revealing the gray bones of the planks beneath. The handrail leaned a little, as if even wood could grow tired of holding on. I stopped in the middle, leaned out, and saw my reflection split in two by the current. The left half looked older. The right half looked like the girl who'd once dropped stones here, naming each for a wish. Eli had always thrown his farther. Distance doesn't mean more luck, I used to tell him. Maybe not, he'd say, but it means the wish had to learn to swim. I smiled at the memory, soft, stupid, and then I saw movement under the bridge. A shimmer, a flash, something caught against a piling. Another bottle. I knelt, heart tapping too fast. The object spun once, twice, then vanished deeper, pulled by the undercurrent before I could reach. Only a scrap of ribbon floated up, red, sun-bleached to coral. For a moment, it felt personal, as if the river were teasing me. You want answers? Catch me first. By the time I reached the house, the sky had shifted to pewter. I lit a candle, even though the power still worked. The flame steadied me better than the coffee. The envelope pack sat unopened beside the letters. I reached for them, then stopped. There was something else I hadn't opened yet, the wooden trunk beneath the window seat. My grandmother's. Inside, books swollen from humidity, an old hairbrush, a stack of notebooks tied with blue yarn. The top one said Spring 1989. I opened at random. Her handwriting slanted like wind-blown grass. May 3rd, Eli brought her flowers from the bend again. She laughs when she's with him. I worry she's forgetting why we promised to leave. I froze. Eli, I read it again. It couldn't be him. The dates didn't match. My grandmother had written this before I was even born. I turned the page. May 7th, the river rose too high tonight. He said it's only water, but I saw how he looked at her. Water isn't what scares me anymore. The candle guttered. My pulse filled the quiet. I looked at the page, then at the bottle on the table, and the letters, and the name signed E. The air inside the house changed, as if something listening had leaned closer. I whispered, to no one. Who are you, Eli? Outside, the tide had turned again, crawling back up the shore like a thought refusing to die. That night I dreamed of the river running backward. Boats slid upstream without sound. The stars were caught in the water like coins that no one dared to pick up. Someone stood on the footbridge, hands in his pockets, looking down. He didn't move when I called his name. When I stepped closer, the boards beneath me turned to glass, and through it I saw myself small, barefoot, holding a red ribbon that trailed into the dark. Then I woke to rain. The sound of it was the same rhythm as Eli's hammer. 1, 2, 3, rest. I lay still, trying to keep the dream from spilling into the day. But the river didn't care for boundaries. Its voice came through the window, all whisper and insistence. By the time I reached the bridge, the rain had faded to drizzle. Mist rose off the water in ribbons, blurring the far bank into watercolor gray, and there, leaning on the rail, like the dream had simply continued, stood Eli. He turned as I approached, and for a heartbeat I almost said you were there. Instead, I said, you work early. Boats don't fix themselves, he said with a half smile. You couldn't sleep either. I shook my head. The river's too loud. He nodded as if he understood exactly what that meant. We watched the current together. It carried twigs, a stray feather, a single leaf that spun until it disappeared under the shadow of the bridge. The silence between us wasn't awkward, just heavy with all the things we didn't have names for yet. I asked, did you know my grandmother kept journals? His jaw moved, a small pause. Everyone knew, she wrote. No one knew what about. She wrote your name, I said. He looked at me, then really looked hand for a second. The years between us folded like paper. My father's name was Eli too, he said quietly. He died before I was born. Maybe she meant him, maybe. The lie was soft, but it didn't fit anywhere. The way he said father, careful, respectful, distant, didn't sound like the man in the diary who brought flowers from the bend. We leaned over the railing, watching our reflections ripple into strangers. I used to think, he said, the river remembered everything. Turns out, it forgets faster than people do. Or maybe it keeps what we throw away. He smiled. Then it must be full of what? Half-truths, he said. Lost shoes, promises. The drizzle turned to fog. Somewhere upstream, a bell buoy tolled a low, tired sound that felt older than the town itself. I found another letter, I said. He didn't ask where. He just waited. It was in my grandmother's trunk. Same handwriting. Same initial. The E, he said. Yes. He rubbed the back of his neck. You think it's me? I don't know, I said. Do you? I don't write letters, he said, and looked away. The river moved beneath us, restless. Somewhere in that motion, I thought I saw a flash of color, a faint red thread slipping through the gray, vanishing toward the bend. The same coral shade as the ribbon that had escaped me yesterday. When I blinked, it was gone. Mara, he said. But I was already stepping off the bridge, eyes fixed on the fog, because for one impossible moment, I could swear someone else had whispered my name from the other side of the river. The rain didn't stop that night. It pressed on the roof like a heartbeat too close to the ear, steady and unrelenting. I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always did when silence became too heavy. I cleaned. The living room was small, and every sound belonged to it. The creak of the floor, the sigh of the kettle, the soft shuffle of my own breathing. When I moved the old armchair to sweep beneath it, the leg scraped against a plank that sounded different, hollow, like a note out of tune. I knelt. The wood was darker there, grain warped from years of tide air. One tug, and the corner lifted. Inside was a small compartment, lined with an old quilt scrap, and stacked neatly within jars, dozens, maybe more, all sealed in glassine envelopes, edges yellowed, tied together with twine that had turned the color of smoke. I touched one. The paper was soft as skin. Each envelope bore the same name, Mara. Not dear Mara, not to be opened later, just my name, but the dates, those were older than me. 1989, 1990, 1991. Years that belonged to someone else's story. My hands shook as I untied the bundle. The first letter smelled faintly of river water and lavender soap. The handwriting was the same as the bottle letter, the same open-ended A, the same fish hook, and yet every word looked careful, almost afraid of its own truth. Mara, if you ever come back to the house, know this. The river forgets what we ask it to keep, but it keeps what we try hardest to forget. I read the line 3 times. The second letter began with the day June 12, 1990. The boy came again today. I told him she's gone, but he doesn't believe me. He says the current brought back her ribbon. Maybe the river is trying to speak. Maybe it knows what we did. My throat tightened. The boy, the ribbon, Eli's father. I spread the letters across the table. Each one was a piece of a puzzle with no corners, no picture to guide it. The ink had bled in some, turning words into blue ghosts. Others were sharp, precise, almost recent in their freshness, as if written yesterday by a hand that refused to age. If she ever reads these, tell her not to follow the bend. Some things look like endings, but they're traps the river sets for memory. I pressed my palms flat on the table. The candlelight trembled. Outside, thunder rolled distant but deep, like a door closing far below the ground. And under that sound a knock, soft, barely there. From the porch, I froze. The second knock came slower. I stood, every sound in the house leaning forward with me. When I opened the door, no one was there. Only rain and a folded piece of paper weighed down by a stone. I lifted it, hands shaking. It wasn't an envelope this time. Just a single page, soaked but legible. Stop reading their letters. You'll wake what's sleeping. The lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a figure at the foot of the path toll, still, watching. When the light faded, there was nothing but the sound of the river, louder than before, as if it had finally remembered my name. The rain had lasted 3 days. By the fourth, the town began to speak in the language of warnings. Sandbags stacked like punctuation marks. Sirens tested for practice, the mayor's voice trembling on the radio as if afraid of his own forecast. From my window, the river looked swollen, alive in the wrong way. It pushed at its banks like a restless animal, dark foam curling at the edges where the current hit the old stones. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and went outside. The street smelled of wet earth and diesel from the trucks hauling sacks to the levee site. Someone shouted over the wind that the bridge might close by evening. Someone else said the river had already taken a dog. Everywhere, there was motion of people trying to stay still. Eli was at the boathouse, sleeves rolled, his face streaked with rain and sweat. He looked up as I approached. "You shouldn't be out," he said. "You aren't in either," I said. He huffed something between a laugh and a sigh. "This old hole's not going to survive the flood. I'm trying to get her higher ground. Need help?" He started to say no, then stopped. "Hold the bowline." We worked in silence, muscles and mud. The air smelled of pine tar and storm. When we finally wedged the boat onto the trailer, rain began again, needles of silver stinging our faces. I asked, "Did this happen before?" He nodded slowly. 89. "The year my father disappeared." I froze. "Disappeared." "Went out before dawn. Boat came back without him." His jaw tightened. "They said it was the storm." "And you believe that?" He looked at me, eyes unreadable. "Do you?" I didn't answer. The wind filled the space between us, loud and lonely. We stood there until lightning stitched the horizon open and the thunder folded it back. Rain flooded the dirt under our boots, running downhill toward the water like it couldn't wait to join. When we turned toward the house, a flash reflected something in the mud bottle. Half buried. I crouched, dug it free. Inside, no letter this time. Only a strip of film, curled and dark. I held it to the light from the porch. The rainwater made the image shimmer, a blurred silhouette on the bridge, someone holding a red ribbon. Eli saw it and went pale. "Where did you get that?" "The river," I said. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on the film, as if afraid it might vanish. He stopped himself. "Throw it away, Mara." "Why?" "It's a trick of light. Nothing more." But his voice cracked on light. He turned and walked off into the rain, his figure dissolving before I could ask anything else. I stood on the porch, the film trembling between my fingers. In the flash of lightning, for one heartbeat, the figure in the picture seemed to move, turning its face toward me. And in that split second, I understood the truth I didn't want to name. The river wasn't carrying messages anymore. It was answering them. The rain stopped at dawn, but the world stayed gray, as if the clouds had forgotten how to leave. I spent the morning drying the floor, folding towels, pretending that the house wasn't whispering around me. But the silence had changed thicker now, like something waiting for an answer. The bottle, the film, the letters, they all sat on the table in uneasy company. I kept glancing at them, expecting them to shift when I wasn't looking. When the kettle whistled, I flinched. That's when I noticed the drawer under the kitchen window, one I'd never seen before. The wood was warped, but the handle gave after a pull. Inside was a roll of parchment, stiff and yellowing, tied with a thin ribbon the color of dust. I spread it open across the table. It wasn't a map of the town as I knew it. The river ran in a different direction, looping where there should have been land, cutting through what was now forest. And near the bend, written in faded ink, "Star's elbow not to be redrawn." My pulse jumped. The handwriting was my mother's. At the bottom corner, a date, 1989. The same year Eli's father vanished. The same year the letters began. I traced the lines with my finger, the path curling like memory, itself deliberate, imperfect, alive. A sound startled me. A clatter, small, metallic. From the cupboard by the stairs. I opened it and found a small tape recorder, the kind you had to press hard to make play. A cassette was already inside. Label faded, but one word still legible: river. My hands hesitated before pressing play. The tape hissed. Then a woman's voice, soft, breathy, cracked at the edges. If you're hearing this, Mara, I couldn't keep it. The river remembers what we hide in it. It carried him back, and I pause. If it asks for you, don't answer. Not until you've seen the map. Static swallowed the rest. I rewound it, replayed it. But the tape broke mid-sentence, thin ribbon curling out like a dead vein. I just sat there, the recorder still humming under my palm. Outside, the river shimmered in weak light, wide and patient. I carried the map to the porch. The water was higher than it should have been for morning. From here, I could see the Benstar's elbow fog curling above it like breath on glass. Somewhere beyond that curve was a piece of the river no one wanted to redraw. Eli's voice echoed from the road. You're staring like it's going to talk back. I didn't turn. Maybe it already did. He came closer, boots sloshing through puddles. What's that? A map, I said. My mother's. He frowned. She drew the old river line. How do you know? He hesitated. My father worked with her. He was the town's mapmaker. They argued about where the river truly ended, and he said you can't change a river's path without changing its memory. He looked out at the fog. Then the storm came. And he drowned, I said. Or the river took him back, Eli whispered. The wind shifted. Something dark floated near the far bank, a bottle. Then another. And another. The surface glittered with glass, dozens of bottles bumping together like a chorus of small, fragile hearts. Eli took a step back. God, he murmured. I felt it too, that hum in the air, low and ancient, like the sound inside a seashell. The river wasn't quiet anymore. It was listening. Morning came the way forgiveness does, slowly, without warning. The sky had washed itself pale, the air tasting of iron and rain. After a night of thunder and dreams, I needed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The diner sat where it always had, stubborn and shining in the damp light. Its windows fogged from the heat of pancakes and conversation. The sign still read Dell's, though Mr. Delaney had been gone for years. Inside, time held still. Same checkered floor, same smell of syrup and old vinyl seats. A woman stood behind the counter, gray hair pinned up with a pencil, eyes the color of weak tea. She looked at me as if she'd been expecting me. River girl, she said. I blinked. Excuse me, you're Mara, aren't you? Caroline's daughter. I nodded before my brain caught up. You knew my mother? Knew her, yes. Loved her, probably more than she loved herself. She poured coffee into a chipped mug and slid it toward me. She used to sit right there every Thursday, sketching the river on napkins like it owed her something. I traced the rim of the cup. Did she talk about the flood? The letters? The boy? The woman smiled without joy. You think this town forgets? I just want to understand. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Your mother tried to redraw the river. Said if she could map it right, she could make it stop taking houses, people, memories. Her gaze softened. She never realized some rivers aren't meant to be fixed, they're meant to be followed. I thought of the map, the warning, the tape. She left because of him, didn't she? Eli's father. She left because she thought she'd broken the promise. What promise? The woman looked toward the window, where the rain had left streaks like veins on glass. She once told me, if you live your life tracing someone else's current, you drown quietly. That's what she wanted to save you from. Outside, a truck passed, spraying water like applause. I felt something shift inside me, not an answer, but the shape of one. She's still here, you know, the woman said. Not the body, the choice. Every time the tide rises, the river asks the same question. Will you stay, or will you follow? I stared into my coffee. The reflection trembled with the ceiling lights. A small private tide. I don't know yet, I whispered. The woman smiled, the kind that carried both pity and blessing. Then don't rush. The river never does. When I left, the bell above the door gave a tired jingle. The air outside was lighter. Across the street, the water glimmered between buildings, silver and endless, like something that forgives, but never forgets. By evening the air had turned to silver. Mist hung low over the river, like something half remembered, half refused. When Eli knocked, I already knew it was him. The sound was steady, certain, like a tide I'd been expecting. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, wet hair catching the light of the lantern. "The water's calm tonight," he said. "Want to see the bend?" "The bend?" I asked, though I knew which one he meant. He nodded. "Star's Elbow. Before the current changes again." I hesitated. The letters, the tape, the map, they whispered against my ribs. But curiosity, that old ache, pushed harder. "I'll go," I said. The boat waited at the dock, its paint still fresh, its engine humming like a secret trying to behave. We drifted out, the town shrinking behind us, until only the diner's neon remained a red echo on the water. For a while neither of us spoke. The river moved under us like a slow breath. Eli broke the silence first. "You ever think the river has a memory?" I smiled faintly. "I think it has moods." "Moods, sure. But memory, that's different. It's the things it keeps, the ones it won't return." "Like your father?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Finally, like your mother." The words hit soft but deep. We floated in that pause, the sound of water against wood filling the space. "I listened to her tape," I said quietly. "She sounded scared." "She was," he said. "They all were. My father, too. They thought they could redraw something that didn't want to be changed. The river," he nodded, "or themselves." The moon slid between clouds, pale and watchful. I looked at him, his profile all shadow and light, a boy carved by weather and regret. He looked older in that moment, and sadder. "She told me not to answer it," I said. "The river?" He turned toward me. "And if it calls again? I don't know." He leaned closer, voice low. "Then don't answer alone." The engine coughed, faltered. The current caught us, tugging the boat sideways. Eli killed the motor, grabbed the oar. "Hold on." The fog thickened until the world shrank to a circle of silver around us. Somewhere beneath, the water made a sound I'd never heard before, low, rhythmic, almost human. It rose and fell like lungs drawing breath. Eli froze. "You hear that, yes?" "It's not the current," he whispered. It's before he could finish, the oar jerked from his hands, something pulling at it from below. We both leaned forward, and there, just beyond the surface, letters shimmered in reflected moonlight. Faint, shifting, but clear enough to read. Mar, A. Then they vanished as the fog closed again. We sat in stunned silence, the only sound our own breathing trying to match the river's. The storm came without warning, a wall of water and sound. By the time I reached the window, the dock was already gone, the river swallowing it in slow, hungry bites. Eli's boat, the same one we'd taken the night before, was half torn from its rope, jerking like a frightened animal. I threw on my coat and ran out before thinking. The wind burned cold, stinging my face with rain. Lightning cracked the sky wide open, revealing the bend only for an instant. Star's Elbow, a blur of silver rage. "Mara." Eli's voice came from the road, distant, broken by the wind. He ran toward me, soaked through, a flashlight shaking in his hand. "You can't be out here. The river is taking everything," I shouted. "It took the dock. It always does." He grabbed my arm. "Get inside." But before he could pull me back, something hit the shore, a heavy thud, half wood, half metal. It was a wooden chest, old, water-swollen, bumping against the mud like it had crawled home. I tore free and waded toward it. "Mara, don't," Eli yelled, but the sound was swallowed by thunder. The chest was small, the hinges rusted. When I pried it open, the smell of river and cedar rushed out. Inside, photographs, a small cassette, a folded letter sealed in wax. My hands trembled. The letter was addressed to me. Lightning flashed again. Lai was beside me now, eyes wide. "What is it?" "My mother's writing." The tape's label read the same word as before, river. But this one had a second line beneath it, for after the storm. We ran back to the house as the rain thickened. The power flickered, then steadied, blue and weak. Eli closed the shutters while I fed the tape into the recorder. The hiss filled the room, familiar as breath. Then her voice, softer now, calmer, almost kind. "If you found this, the river has given it back. I thought I could keep its promise by leaving, but promises, like rivers, don't stop, they change shape. The letters were not mine alone. We wrote them together, he and I. He wanted you to come home, to see what we couldn't finish. When the water calls your name, don't be afraid. It's only trying to return what it kept. The tape clicked to an end. Outside, the thunder rolled away, slower now, almost tired. Eli exhaled. She and my father, they were both the rivers, I said, and it kept them. The silence after felt clean, like air after lightning. We stood close, watching drops fall from our hair onto the old floorboards. Then, faint at first, came another sound, steady, rising through the floor like breath through skin. A heartbeat, deep and patient, echoing from beneath the house. Eli's hand found mine. We didn't move. The river was no longer outside, it was everywhere. The storm had passed. The air smelled of ash and salt, the kind of silence that follows confession. Through the cracked shutters, a thin line of light crawled across the floorboards like something fragile learning to breathe again. Eli was asleep on the chair, boots still on, head tilted back. The recorder sat between us, silent now, its spool of tape unraveled across the table like a trail we could no longer rewind. I stepped outside. The river was swollen but calm, bruised colors of dawn spilling over it, lavender, pearl, a touch of rust. Debris floated past, a shoe, a branch, half a photograph. Each carried its own kind of surrender. I walked down to the edge, barefoot, the mud cold but forgiving. The current lapped at my toes like a question. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear it, the heartbeat beneath the house, the whisper in the flood. Only now it sounded less like fear and more like a voice saying stay. Behind me, Eli stirred. You should rest, he said, voice rough. So should you. He came to stand beside me, both of us looking at the water as if it might explain everything. She kept the promise, in her way, he said. She tried to name it, I replied. To draw it, define it. Maybe that's why it kept coming back. What would you call it? He asked. I thought about it. The river that forgot. The river that remembered. The river that loved too hard. Finally, I said, home. Eli smiled, the kind that reached only halfway but felt true. Then it's a good name. We stood there until the sun cleared the fog, turning the water to molten gold. And for a moment, I could almost see them, two figures in the light near the bend, walking where the current slowed. My mother's scarf, Eli's father's hat. They didn't look back. A gust of wind rippled the surface, erasing them, or maybe returning them to where they'd always belonged. Eli exhaled. Guess the river keeps what matters, or gives it back when we're ready, I said. The tide touched the hem of my dress, a gentle reminder. I stepped back, smiled. It's moving again. So are we, he said. For the first time in years, the water looked like it was flowing towards something, instead of away. And I realized maybe that was all any current ever wanted. To be seen, to be named, and then, finally, to let go. Night came quiet and forgiving. The river, no longer swollen, moved like silk under the half-moon. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't taste of storm. Eli and I walked the trail past the pine grove, our flashlights catching on wet leaves and bits of driftwood. At the end of the path, the trees opened into a clearing, and there it was, the bend, Star's Elbow. The current slowed there, curving around a sandbar shaped like an open hand. Above it, the sky had cleared. Stars poured down so thick it felt like standing beneath a reversed ocean. I took off my shoes. The sand was cool, the water thin as glass. This is where it began, I said. Eli nodded. And maybe where it ends. We sat near the water's edge. He set a lantern between us. Its flame trembled like a heartbeat learning a gentler rhythm. I pulled the old letters from my bag, the ones that had survived the flood. The paper was warped, edges curling like petals. I don't know what to do with them, I said. Maybe nothing, he answered. Maybe they were meant to make you come back, and that's all. The riverside against the shore, small waves like breath. For a while we just listened to the water, to crickets, to everything that wasn't gone after all. Finally I said, she used to tell me stars were the river's memory of light. That every reflection is a kind of forgiveness. Eli smiled. Then tonight it remembers everything. I leaned back, letting the sand take my weight. Above me, constellations trembled in the current's mirror, each ripple rewriting the sky. It didn't matter what was true anymore. Both heavens were beautiful. Eli picked up a smooth stone, turned it in his palm. Let's give it a name, he said. The current? I thought for a long time, then whispered, Grace. He tossed the stone into the bend. The splash was small, but the ripples stretched wide, touching every star on the water. Grace it is, he said. We stayed until the lantern died and the stars were enough. When we finally stood, the river kept its quiet promise. It hid the stars again, only so we could remember they'd been there. A week after the storm, the town smelled of sunlight and damp earth. People patched roofs, fixed docks, told stories about the river the way others spoke of weather, something that happened, something that passed. I stayed. Not because I was afraid to leave, but because leaving no longer felt like movement. Sometimes the only way forward is to stay long enough for the current to change beneath you. The house had dried. The floorboards, once swollen, now sang softly when I walked. I cleaned the shelves, framed one of my mother's sketches, and kept the map on the wall folded open to the bend that hid the stars. Every morning I added my own line to it, where the river turned that day, how it sounded, what it remembered. Eli came by most evenings. We talked little, worked more rebuilding the dock, sanding the hull of the boat. He named it Grace, after the word we'd given the current. Sometimes, when the wind was right, we'd hear laughter from the diner, the bell above its door jingling like the past politely knocking. The town had begun to live again, but quieter, as if it, too, had learned to listen. One night, long after the lights had gone out, I woke to the sound of water. Not the storm's roar, but a steady pulse, low and rhythmic like breath, like a heartbeat remembering its purpose. I followed it to the porch. The river gleamed under starlight.com, and endless. At its edge floated a single bottle, green glass catching the moon. I waded in. The water was cold but kind. When I lifted the bottle, a folded page pressed against the glass. The ink was blurred, but I could still make out the first line. Mara, you can stop looking. The river has already learned your name. No signature. No E. Just the words, weightless and sure. I smiled, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than joy. Then I set the bottle back into the current and watched it drift away, carrying the name I no longer needed to keep. Behind me, Eli's voice was soft with sleep. You're awake. Just saying goodnight, I said. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded, hair silvered by moonlight. To who? To everything that stayed. The river moved, whispering over stones. I listened until its sound became my own breathing. And when the stars began to fade, I realized what my mother had meant all along. That home isn't a house, or a person, or even a place. Home is the moment you stop fighting the water, and finally let it carry you.